Also, pretty cool wildcard. I'm not sure what part of the game it was. It was like maybe sometime in the second quarter. I was watching the Auckland Huskies get absolutely destroyed. Not quite. The hefty loss to the Canterbury Rams, I think it was, in the Aotearoa NBL. And this dude, Nathan Wilson, comes off the bench and absolutely lights up that game for the Auckland Huskies. And it was to the extent wildcard. Like, he had a couple blocks, he had steals, he had points. I'm not sure if that was his, NBL debut.
It might have been. I don't know. I wasn't familiar with the fella beforehand. I know he's pretty fresh to the sport as well, and he's relatively young, so it very well could have been.
I think it may have been his debut. I'll double check that. But it was the craziest couple of minutes from a new player, and if it was his debut, a player on debut in the NBL, he's only 19 or 20, and just cruising through some of the NBL stuff here. I can't find it. And Nathan Wilson, this dude, he's got a Kevin Durant body type, tall and skinny, and he was just jumping out of the building. And my point here, wildcard, is I've never seen that kind of impact from someone either early in their career or on their first appearance in the NBL. It was a couple minutes of just absolute mayhem from this dude, and he could do no wrong. Anytime Canterbury came down and got the ball to the hoop and Nathan Wilson was there, watch out. He doesn't fuck around. He's going to block your shot. And he's a ball of energy as well. He's mobile, he's big, and I'm going to go out on a limb to set up this NBL discussion. I don't know how good the Huskies are going to be, wildcard. Maybe you can help me out there. But Nathan Wilson is my cult hero status player of the NBL this year. Post-pandemic restart antics. I'm all about Nathan Wilson, and I'm going to pay close attention to the Auckland Huskies and Nathan Wilson because he is my cult hero favorite NBL player based on the few minutes that I saw in that first game. So I'll pass it over to you. If you've got any thoughts on Nathan Wilson, he does have a highlights package on YouTube as well from the National Secondary Schools Tournament, I think it was last year. So you can check that out on YouTube. Just search Nathan Wilson basketball. Do you have any thoughts on Nathan Wilson wildcard? Or do you have a different player that you're going to put in your cult hero status that is mandatory viewing for yourself to go up against my pick of Nathan Wilson?
Well, I do have some thoughts on young Nate Wilson with the albatross wingspan there. Because the interesting thing about him was he was a 12th round pick for the Huskies. So when you think about all the conversation leading up to this NBL showdown and the various necessary but still kind of somewhat regrettable kind of sacrifices that had to be made to get here, and the shortened time span and all this, and the minimal preparation, which I think was maybe the one that grinded on me the most, was that you could have just started this next week and given teams a little bit longer to actually train together and be prepared. Would that have made that much of a difference? I don't know. Or even just on Friday night or something, big reveal. But also the way the competition is structured, you also have to admit that because every team is going to make the playoffs to at least some degree, the bottom 2 place teams have a playoff to then face the third place team, or so, which is effectively playing in for the quarterfinals kind of thing. Everyone gets that lifeline at the end. It's harder if you're at the bottom, but it's not all over just because of that, which means that you can afford to take the first week or two, especially just to play yourself into form and rhythm and work on those combinations kind of on the fly. So I think that's also a thing to keep contextually in mind. But the lack of some of the top players has also been, and you see a few of them, a lot of the Breakers guys have been sitting in the crowd watching. I've seen Tom Abercrombie went on the tally at one point. The Corey Webster was there with Ty Webster as well, sitting with him. Their dad is the assistant coach for Franklin Bulls, I think it is. Interesting story on the Franklin Bulls as well, with their main coach, Liam Simmons is his name. He's an Australian dude with a slightly American accent. He's actually the brother of Ben Simmons from the 76ers. The reason he's got an American accent is because he's been over there for quite a while, coaching at a college level and coaching with the 76ers in a capacity like working with his brother, half-brother technically, but, brothers, it's the same thing. So cool story there that I had no idea about. One of those many little nuggets that have emerged in the from this NBL already, just in the first couple of days. Not in the least of which another one of those nuggets being the Otago Nuggets re-emerging after several years out. But regarding some of the players that aren't there, like obviously it would be nice to have the Webster brothers and guys like that. But then the flip side of that is if you had a lot of those guys, a fella like Nate Wilson wouldn't be playing. Like, he was a 12th round pick. He wouldn't have been picked up by one of these other teams if a few more of the top Tall Blacks. Like, and you can't have watched that just like incendiary little spell he had for the Huskies and thought like anything other than this is a dude who knows that this is his opportunity to shine. Like, he's out there doing absolutely everything he can to make a name for himself, and he did. Like, and that's the opportunity that so many other players in his position are gonna have as well. So. I kept an eye out during yesterday's games as well, and throughout all, I've watched all 4 of the games so far, as of time of recording, and I mean, keeping an eye out for other guys in that sort of situation. I haven't like settled on anyone in particular. There's a few names we can go through later, some of the better performers and stuff like that, but it's just I really like that idea of just the open book of guys like Nathan Wilson, for example, who can just come in and say like, I'm a little bit lucky, a little bit fortuitous that things have worked out the way they have, that I've got this opportunity, but god damn it, I'm not going to let it slide. You know what I mean?
Definitely loosen up your cult hero status borders there a bit, and just parlay it into like who's your favorite player from that. Because that's essentially what I'm saying. Like, I mean, old mate Jared Kenny, pretty damn cool. I like the look of Tom Vodanovich. He's involved in everything. I like watching the Nuggets, like the Jared Kenny and Ngatai duo, which didn't feel overly sustainable because it was kind of only awesome when they were both on the court together, but I like watching it and I enjoy watching those two together. All of that is like secondary to my fascination with Nathan Wilson, but I say all of that just to set this up as like, just who is your favorite player from that opening couple of nights that isn't deeper in the depth chart for that cult hero status, but is cult hero status in the fact that they're just your favorite player and they might be someone else's favorite player to keep an eye on.
Yeah, some of the guys I've been sort of paying a little more attention to for that reason, guys I've tried to keep like just a little bit of a line on because I haven't really seen them before. Those dudes who are coming back from college, so like, and a lot of those guys exactly the same kind of thing. Like, they got a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They haven't either they've most of them probably played NBL in the past before they went over to the States, or even possibly in between seasons and stuff. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but they've maybe been on the scene before, but going away to few years in the America, learning your trade like that, becoming just more of a growing as a person as well, and then coming back and really just looking to assert themselves like that. I think Isaac Davidson was a dude for Franklin who was just coming in and knocking down 3-pointers all over the show. He goes, what did he score, like 27 points or something in that game? His teammate Sam Timmons is another one who's like, we're not going to get to see Jack Sold, unfortunately, because he got injured. Sam Timmons is a dude who has not to the same success because he wasn't as good of a school while he was over there, but Sam Timmons had a similar kind of college career to Jack Sold, where it's like some games he's barely going to play, just as that big man, like the Andrew Bogut kind of role big man. Some games minimal factor. Other games, maybe he'll get, a bunch of touches and a few finishes at the rim and get a bunch of rebounds and be a little bit of an undercover hero. But every single game, he's going to go out there and do exactly what the coach asks and give you 100%, kind of one of those fellas. Didn't see a massive amount from him in that game for Franklin. Who was the other one I was trying to... Jaden Bazant as well. I thought he had a real tidy-looking game. He had the old headband going as well, so he's clearly a fella after my own attention too. Been known to rock the old rolled-up bandana myself at times. And a fella who we didn't see in the first game as well, who's also on that same radar for me, is Isiah Mario for the Huskies, who is... I don't think I've seen him play at all, but he's got some big raps about him. He missed the first game, and hopefully we'll play the second and go carrying on, because I very much want to see what that fella's all about. He went with the last pick of the first round as well, so it's not just a matter of people talking him up. There's also been a bit of money on the table from the Huskies, who have been we don't just think this guy is a useful prospect. We think this guy is the first player we want to put on our roster. So, and a few names there to keep an eye on, fellas who have definitely done well. It's been interesting as well seeing a lot of the veterans, like you mentioned, Natai and Jared Kenny. Jared Kenny was excellent for the Nuggets, and that it was a come from behind win as well. They were down a fair bit for a while there. Against, it was Manawatu, wasn't it? And they came back, and Jordan Natai had a clutch 3 near the end. It had a bit of a quiet second half, but Jared Kenny had kind of taken over in his stead. Jordan Hunt had a real good game for them too. I think that Natai Kenny, because the Nuggets are another one of those teams where it's they're fresh on the scene at the moment. They haven't been around for a little while, so guys they've got more work to do in terms of molding guys together. Whereas if you look at the Canterbury team, for example, who, because of injury, don't have Jack Salt, don't have Joe Cook-Green, so there's 2 of their top 3 picks. They were fantastic. They blew out the Huskies in that game you mentioned before, and a lot of that is because they picked guys who have been around the Canterbury Rams in the past. They prioritized the guys they would have had anyway, rather than getting stars in the eyes and trying to pick best players from other teams or best available kind of thing. They stuck to their kind of... foundations, I suppose, and because of that you saw a team that was just ahead of the ball, where they can still be at that level, especially considering that they are missing 2 of their top players. Whether they can stay at that throughout the whole 6 weeks is another task, but certainly at the start you could see the difference between a team that had players that were used to playing together and a team that did not. So lots of various little wrinkles and things to think about with this NBL, and another reason why it's been pretty fascinating and continues to be fascinating, just to see how everything unfolds, really.
So we got it's the Nelson ears, right? Nelson ears 2 from 2. Taranaki is. So
yeah, Nelson Giants is
nice. Nelson Giants, right? So you got the Taranaki ears 2 from 2. They're the only team who has played 2 games thus far. From those early the early stands of their wildcard. Who is looking to you to be teams and players who are going to be the most important? Players who are going to be the most important, and what team do you think is odds-on favorite at this stage? I'm looking around, and Vodanovic is involved in everything. That dude was everywhere. If we're talking he reminds me of a Nelson Asafa-Solomona in the sense that he's a big forward who moves pretty damn well. I'm watching him get up and down the court. He moves around bloody well, but he's a big unit. He's a rugged unit as well, but he's got the athleticism to be a factor everywhere on the court, if that makes a bit of sense. Otherwise, I'm just talking out of my ass. You can let me know about that as well.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I can see it too.
So I'm thinking Vodanovic is going to be one of the most important players. I can see after that performance, Jared Kenny is definitely going to be one of the more important players leading that Nuggets team around. So what players are you thinking are going to be most important, best players in the league, and how does that correspond to a couple of teams who are your favorites for the competition at this early stage?
Yeah, Tom Vodanovic is a really fascinating case as well, because he was a Breakers development player 2 years ago. He was then a Breakers full contracted player last year, getting one of those sort of late roster spots for them at a time when the Breakers were copping a whole lot of heat for not showing a whole lot of interest in the local game at the top level anyway. Very good when it comes to the community side of things, but when it comes to like the structures in basketball New Zealand, the Breakers under their current regime perhaps have left a little to be desired, and there have been a few nice little touches where they've kind of thrown some olive branches out there. Getting Ethan Rusbatch on as a sort of injury replacement player is another one of those, and Tom Vodanovic playing last year was one. But I think Vodanovic probably feels like he didn't quite get the opportunities he would have liked in that year with the Breakers, and he's off contract currently. I didn't realize the bloke could shoot 3-pointers as well. I mean, I knew he could do the hustle stuff in the paint. No dramas there because he's been doing that in the NBL for a couple of years. But the fellow was just knocking down, especially in that first half of that game, he was knocking down 3-pointers all over the show. I had no idea he could do that. I think at one of the halftime interviews or something, he popped up and sort of said, like Casey Frank asked him about that. He said, well, isolation, you can't do a whole lot of work other than just shooting practice. So I guess he's just in the backyard with the ball and a hoop and just throwing him down. So him and also Jordan Ngatai is in exactly the same situation where off contract at the Breakers, probably unlikely to get another contract, but if they're going to, I mean, this is the stage in order to prove that you deserve it. I have noticed Coach Dan Shamir popping up on the telly broadcast. He's certainly been there or thereabouts, having a good close look at some of these things, so that's a good sign. Ngatai and Vodanovic, for those reasons, are two players. Also, Ngatai was the number 1 overall pick, and Vodanovic was, I think, the 3rd. I think that's right. So, two also highly talented players who are going to be leaders for their team. I think, in terms of I don't know exactly what to think about Canterbury because that asterisk with the not having Joe Cook-Green and Jack Salt makes me wonder they could possibly get some decent injury replacements in there and really improve their team upon what we saw in the first game. But I also don't think the Huskies were up to much. So I'm not a little bit of reservation about Canterbury at the moment. So I think after having seen everyone play once and Taranaki play twice, I think the Otago Nuggets and the Taranaki Mountaineers are the two teams that I would, at this very, very, very early stage, put up on that little pedestal and say, these are your title favorites probably at the moment. The Nuggets, because are just very impressed by their roster, for one thing, but also by the fact that I think because of what I was saying before about them being a new team, I think like that sort of Ngatai, Kenny Hunt kind of combinations, they're only going to get better as they play together more often, and they have the right kind of, like someone like Jared Kenny is as much of a veteran presence as you can hope for. He's gonna run the show. You're not going to go astray under that kind of guidance. You're going to be pretty they should make those strides, is what I'm saying. So they're certainly a team to watch out for, and I think Taranaki Mountaineers with they were really good. Both the first two games. Daron Ruakawa looks outstanding. Got Marcel Jones, one of the few import fellas in this competition. Ty Wynyard's there as well, doing a few things. He's certainly beefed up a bit since I last saw him. Ty Wynyard. He hadn't been able to play a whole lot because he had back injury, which pretty much ended his college career after he'd already transferred away from Kentucky to try get more game time. Then I think he got about 3 minutes as a development player in the Aussie NBL for one of them teams last season. So he's at a little bit of a crossroads, and he is a player in an interesting situation. But this is also another opportunity for him to show what he can do. But also he doesn't have to be like. They also got Shane Tomato there, who's another top quality player. They've just got a pretty stacked roster, Taranaki, and led by Ruakawa and Jones is pretty intimidating based on those first few games, especially with the level of point scoring that those two are laying down. And also I'll add that Daron Ruakawa is the best post-game interview I've seen so far, and it's not even close.